Hey everybody, it's Riley here. I am so excited to be this week's featured guest on the ETA Files starring Ryan Pelton. It's going to be a lot of fun, so let's get right into it.
Folks, thanks for tuning in this week to ETA Files. Ryan Pelton here with special guest this week, all the way from Paris, Tennessee, one of the young bucks in the business. Let's hear it from Mr. Riley Jenkins. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's so great to talk with you, brother.
Oh, good to see you, man. You've been busy. You've been busy. I see you
Been
out
busy.
there. It's a good thing, right?
Oh, it's a
Good.
great thing. Wonderful thing.
So recently you just moved back, I guess, moved back to Tennessee.
I did. I just moved back to Tennessee because for the past 2 years, I've been in your neck of the woods. I've been in Branson, Missouri, starring in a little show called Million Dollar Quartet out at the Shepherd of the Hills.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's always funny, those production shows. I don't know. I'm one of those people who think that if you haven't experienced a production show for a little bit of time, at least, you're probably. I'm not going to say I just think it helps you. It rounds you out as an entertainer. You know.
You know, I can't really speak on other people's, experiences and whatnot, but I can speak on mine certainly. And I can tell you that I've had so many people in the past 2 years since doing that show that have told me that they've seen this growth in me that they never saw. Not that I wasn't, good before, but just this polishedness, this, you know, more so sense of, confidence and ease on stage from doing MDQ. So I give so much credit to doing that show day in and day out, week after week, the past 2 years to where I am today in my career.
Yeah, man. It's something to think about when it's all about stage time, right?
Right.
I mean, it really is. It's all about stage time, and there's guys that I feel bad for that don't get the stage time they want. So you're kind of like in this weird catch 22 situation where it's like you have to be decent to get stage time, but in order to get stage time, you got to be decent, you know. And there's certain guys, especially starting out, and I see it where they can't get that stage time. They'll go out and sing karaoke or whatever just to get a little bit of it, you know. So it is interesting. But man, that's the thing about a production show. Man, you get stage time. You get to experiment too, you know. I think
Hmm.
you get a chance to uh like there's a billion different situations that can happen, obviously. From a person sleeping in the front row to a heckler to a great show or to tripping or having a bad vocal night or whatever it is. There's a million things that can happen during live performances. And the more you get a chance to experience those and live through it, uh, I think it makes you just a better, well rounded, and more confident moving forward. Like you can throw anything at me, I'll be fine.
I think the biggest lesson I learned from doing MDQ was the art of pacing. You know, Elvis was such a good pacer on stage. He was constantly building. He'd start out, even back in the 50s. You watch his performances back in the 50s, the few that we have, and he would start out with normally Heartbreak Hotel, just a very bluesy, chill song, and he'd build and build and build. And once he'd get to Hound Dog at the end, he was just off the rails, and the audience was eating it up. And that was one thing I really learned from doing MDQ was the art of pacing and the art of building. Because, we'd start the show out and I would just be that really young Elvis, 1954, 19 years old, truck driver comes in, wants to make a record for his mama. And then, by the end of the show, I'm the Elvis that we all know and we all fell in love with. And the audience, you could just see their reaction to it. They were right there with you for that ride, and I mean, we're eating it up. I mean, by the time we got to Hound Dog at the very end, that's when all the quintessential moves came out: the windmill, the knee slides, the gold, wearing the gold lame on stage. They loved when I came out every night in the gold lame, which is my opinion is the most iconic outfit and jacket that Elvis wore in the 50s. So that was something that I learned and I'm so grateful for. And I wouldn't have learned it, in my opinion, if I would have not done a residency.
Yeah, I get it, man. And, and it goes beyond just you know, it's really storytelling is what you're doing, you know. It really is. There's ebbs and flows, you know. In not only in a performance or in a show, um, but there's also ebbs and flows sometimes in like a single song, um, where there's moments like there's certain songs that you know you feel like out the gate you want to just go hard. But if it's like if you're up here all the time, you know, energy or whatever, if you're up here all the time, then you never have a chance to go higher. You know what I
Right,
mean? But whenever you come out and you have, you know, this kind of thing, it gives you the ability to go here at the end, you
right,
know? And that's a yeah, that's very wise of you. It's just everything needs that arc. And if you don't have it, you know, and that's the art of storytelling. It really is. I mean, you hear about story arcs. It's the same thing, only different musically. And that goes into producing, which I think you probably got a chance to understand better, learn better, being in a production. Someone was there directing you, and it was a production where there was a reason behind all of this, you know, and you're basically, in your case, an actor um,
right.
in a role, not so much just a. I mean, you are a tribute artist, but like in that role, you're more of an acting role than just a tribute artist.
The biggest thing that I was told every show was this is an opportunity for you to tell more of a story about who Elvis the man was versus the entertainer. We all know what Elvis was like as an entertainer, but surprisingly enough, if you go, when we're with our Elvis family, when we're with our ETA brothers and all that, we all know those inside scoops about like how when he went in to make that demo record for his mom, he sang "My Happiness." That's when your heartaches begin. For most people, when they think of Elvis, it's just like Hound Dog, Joss Rock, you
Yeah.
know, oh, don't be cruel. They don't know the inside scoop. And so every night, I was always told that your biggest job is to go out there and be the 19-year-old kid who just wanted to give his mom and dad a better life. And that was I mean, I don't think I would have done the role justice if I wouldn't have had that in my mind every night.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, you're exactly right. You're talking acting now. You're talking about understanding your character and what your character's mindset is. Because when you have that outlook in your mind, it makes you approach things differently, and you have different passions about things. Like Elvis Presley, like the billionaire, millionaire, whatever, you know, young rocker, world famous, probably looked at life different than that 19-year-old kid who they were living in, you know, government housing and very poor and just, you know, was trying to help out, you know, big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, you know, I love getting to draw people more so into the early years of Elvis's career. I think it's so important. This is something that you and I know have talked about a lot. I love all facets of Elvis's career. I love, the movies. I love, the 68 comeback special. I love the 1970s, from That's the Way It Is to Aloha from Hawaii. I even love Elvis in 1977. I think that honestly, his voice, even at the end of his life, while his body may have been physically failing him, was, in my opinion, never more stronger. But there's something so just endearing and timeless about Elvis in the 50s. And I think it's just because you're not just watching an icon, a living legend. You're watching someone literally change the face of American music, of American culture, of American history. And I consider it a huge honor to be able to pay tribute to that time frame in Elvis's career, because it's such a time frame that I feel, surprisingly enough, is actually a little overlooked. And so I love being able to bring people in to what I consider to be the biggest, most, influential portion of Elvis's life and career.
Yeah, man, that's a valid point. And what's crazy is during that time in the 50s, even after 56, 50 by the end of 56, he'd become a millionaire,
Right.
Uh that the year 1956 is incredible. And for everybody out there who has not seen the documentary Elvis 56, go watch it and you understand that story. It's amazing. But what's crazy about it, and the movie kind of alluded to it a little bit, I think. The recent Baz Luhrmann movie Elvis, is that even though he was doing all this and being incredible and changing the face of American music forever, he also along the way had a terrible fear that it would all be gone tomorrow. You know?
That's so true, and you really can't blame him because when you look at the the way that his career went in the 50s, it was so fast. I mean, it was always fast, but it was like just as soon as he shot up and he became at the top of that mountain, then he gets drafted. And it's like, oh my gosh, like maybe this fear of mine is becoming a reality. Like maybe just as soon as I got it, it's now going away. And I think that for as many things, there's always going to be people, that feel one way or another about the Colonel. For as many things as I will say, I think the Colonel may have not done, in my opinion, the best thing for Elvis's career and for Elvis himself. It truly shows a testament to the Colonel's geniusness when it came to marketing and Elvis's massive drawing power with the younger demographic of the 1950s, that he was gone out of the spotlight for 2 years, comes back in 1960, and he's just as big, if not even bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was during a time too, historically, that was during a time whenever rock and roll, which was a new thing, was kind of getting a bad rap, you know.
Yep.
There were some things going on during that time. And um, you know, I love going down these thought trails of like, what if Elvis never went into the army? How would that have changed his career? Or you know what I mean? Or what if he would have went into the army and came back and people would have forgot him? How would have that impacted stuff? I always what if Elvis hadn't gotten into the movies like he did and kind of got stuck in that purgatory almost, for 10 years almost. There's all those different thought experiments you can go into, and it's kind of fun sometimes just to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about the movies, um, all I consider and think about is for how, unfortunately, in my opinion, after Viva Las Vegas, so beginning about 1964, they kind of started to go downhill. The storylines became very formulaic. The production, the sets, the quality became cheaper. He wasn't making the movies like Jailhouse Rock or King Creole anymore, which, in my opinion, were the pinnacle of
Yeah.
his acting abilities. But you think about how many millions of people that probably would have never actually gotten to see Elvis or even see what he would have been like from different countries if the movies hadn't existed. Because as we know, the only time Elvis ever toured outside of America was in Canada. And so he
Two
never
shows, I
got
think,
to
right? Just two shows. Is that correct?
three shows in
Yeah.
1957, and he never got to be able to get the opportunity to tour the UK or all of Europe like he wanted, or Australia, South America, Japan. He never got those opportunities, and that's really always something that I wish I could have gotten to see Elvis do, because how cool would it would have been if Elvis Presley, just like how he was the first guy ever to become the first ever rock star, the first, rock star to cross over into Hollywood, become, you know, the biggest box office draw of the 1960s, to, become the first ever man to do a live concert shown all over the world. What if Elvis Presley would have been the first guy to ever do a world tour? How amazing would that have been?
Yeah. And I mean, he literally could have.
100%.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Uh, Interesting. Well, listen, we're kind dude out the gate. It's very interesting. We were just like talking like old friends. I do want to get your background story though. People are curious about it. I mean, you're can you tell me how old you are? Do you mind?
I am 22 years old.
22. So very interesting age, and we'll get into that in a second. But like, how did you get started in this? You're 22 years old. You've already had 2 years of experience in one of the biggest production shows, out there, off Broadway version of Million Dollar Quartet. So, the talent is there, no doubt about it. But how did you get started in this business? I mean, not everyone at such a young age is exposed and even knows about Elvis, and by just talking to you, you know the history of it too, not just how to get on stage and move around. So I love that. But how did you get started?
So, how my journey to becoming an ETA, it starts off obviously with me becoming an Elvis fan, and that seed was kind of sown when I was 3 years old. I kind of always, thanks to my grandparents who were such influential when it came to my musical taste and whatnot by exposing me to the music of the 1950s and the 1960s from a very young age, and also exposing me to the kind of music that Elvis was influenced by. So especially gospel music, country music, that those kinds of things. I was so I was so honored and to have the honor to be able to have all this music of a bygone era exposed to me at such a young age. So I kind of, to be honest, really grew up knowing of Elvis my whole life, but I just didn't know who he was. And so finally, when I was three, I was at Cracker Barrel with my family, and when you walk in, they always have that little spinning tape thing with the CDs and all that. And at that time, they had something where you could press a button and it would play a sample of a CD. And there was Elvis's picture, and it was the picture of him in Tupelo, September 26th of 1956 at the fairgrounds. And he's got the guitar on, and he looks like he's kind of like leaned over to the fans, and they're just looking up. And that picture just moved me. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. And I asked my grandmother, I was like, "Who's this guy?" And she said, "Honey, that's Elvis Presley." And I was like, "Elvis Presley, that's a funny name." And my grandfather was like, "Son, he's the king." And I was just like, "Wow, if he must be, I mean, he must be pretty dang cool for my grandfather, who I thought at that time was the coolest, toughest guy in the world, to call him the king." So I pressed the sample and it played Blue Suede Shoes. And I was just like, I
Oh,
mean,
that's great.
where has this been? I was like, I've never heard something like this in my life. And I played that thing like, God bless everybody who was in Cracker Barrel at that time. They probably never wanted to listen to Blue Suede Shoes again because I played it just over and over and over and over and over. And so right then, I just became drawn into Elvis. That was the power. I started, listening to his music, watching his movies. When I got old enough, I started researching about him, wanting to learn more about him. And then, when I was 6, I even entered my talent show at my school in my Halloween costume from the previous year as Elvis, and I sang Blue Suede Shoes for my whole school. And I just remember like that feeling that I got on stage when the whole audience just went like pandemonium because there's a 6-year-old kid, he's singing Blue Suede Shoes. They thought it was amazing, and it was a feeling I've never felt. So about when I was 9 years old, my grandparents came to my house. They said, "We have a surprise." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" And they said, "We're going to take you to see this Elvis Tribute Artist show." Now, I'd heard of impersonators at the time, and I'd seen some of them, and I really wasn't that much of a fan of them because they weren't, in my opinion, doing it justice. They were, you know, going the more gimmicky way, kind of more so the parody of Elvis, as we all know, unfortunately, and more so it was more so of a jab at Elvis, and it was the whole like thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and like almost I always said it was almost more like watching a Johnny Bravo cartoon than it was watching Elvis. And and for those of you who don't know, Johnny Bravo was a cartoon in the 1990s and 2000s on Cartoon Network. So I always said that's kind of what it was. So and they were like, no, 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 no. The guy we're gonna go see, he's legit. And it was Shawn. It was Shawn Klush. They were like, he's won this contest down at Graceland. He won this contest on BBC that Joe Esposito was a judge of, and told me all these things. And he's gonna have this other guy with him that's opening up doing the 50s. and that happened to be Cody Ray Slaughter, who was our reigning champion at the time of the Ultimate. And they were like, Ray Walker, the Jordanaire is going to be there, the Sweet Inspirations. And so finally I was like, okay, I'll go. But to be honest, I was not having it. Like I did not want to be there at all. Like I literally, I feel so bad this day because I probably was the most miserable kid to bring to that show until Cody came on. And when Cody came on, when I tell you, Ryan, that I was taken back to that year of 1956, 1,000%. I couldn't react. I couldn't clap. I couldn't speak. I couldn't hardly even blink. I literally I'd never felt something like that in my life. I'd never seen, because we have watched Elvis on television. We have watched him in the movies. We have watched him, the bootleg footages of him on stage. But we never really, have, unless you were alive then, they always say there was nothing like seeing him in the flesh. And unfortunately, I never got that opportunity. When I saw Cody, I knew right then, I was like, this has got to be the closest thing I'm ever going to get to seeing Elvis in 1956. And I literally remember telling my grandmother, I'm like, you see that right there? That's what I'm going to do. And that was how it all really began. And so, you know, about 14 years old, she takes me to my first ever Elvis week. I sing at the tent over the Graceland Crossing at the time. It's now in the Graceland Exhibition Center, and you know, just went to sing. Didn't think really much would come up from it, and it just blew up. I mean, people came up to me and like, "Who are you? Like, where have you been? You need to enter this contest. You need to enter that." And that's really how this all started. And here I am now, 9 years later, and it's such a eh, to say an honor is almost an understatement. It's a gift. It's a gift to get to do what we do.
Yeah.
To take people back to a time frame that when they were a kid and they were experiencing all this in real time, and then also to open the door for people that are my age that are younger than me that didn't get to experience that and show them this is why Elvis is Elvis. It's not just grandma or mom, dad, aunt, uncle are just crazy about this guy they grew up with when they were kids. It's because without him, modern day music, the modern day culture, it wouldn't be what it is. And so I mean, I always say I'm living the dream, and I really am. I'm living the dream. It's such a good it's there's nothing like it. There really isn't. I'm so blessed.
Yeah, man. I tell you what, some of those stories are, it's really interesting how we are Elvis fans, but there are certain guys in certain moments, man. I think that you just can't help in this business to early on, especially see that person or people that like kind of almost connects the dots for you. You've seen television or movies or whatever footage of Elvis, okay, but then you talk about Cody Ray Slaughter and what an amazing person to get that visual from. I mean, he's stinking incredible. But I remember like first time of seeing Rick Sacido um, performing Jailhouse Rock and watching him come out on stage at the Star Plaza, couple 3,000 people, 3,500 people there, just going nuts, and seeing him come out and how he moved, and me being early on in the game, but saying that's exactly how Elvis moved. It's like
Yeah.
oh my, that's what it's like, and I felt like I was watching Elvis because it was all so similar. And then seeing Shawn Klush doing the 70s, back in this is like in the 98, and he was just tearing it up with That's the Way It Is stuff. And I mean, and it was incredible. And Shawn's always been one of my favorites. And then, seeing
Love
seeing
Shawn.
seeing Cody Ray Slaughter, you know, seeing like a young Dean Z. It's kind of funny. You talk about how, being young, starting like 14 and going to Graceland. Man, Dean used to come out all the time, when he was like 11 years old or something, and after parties, he'd be standing on a end table in the middle of the the hotel lobby singing a song, playing guitar, you know. So it's kind of that, you kind of have that feel like, and I remember when you started coming up and all the guys kind of just, you know, wanted to take care of you, protect you, kind of father you, so to speak, up in the world. And a lot of guys, I mean, everyone loved you, but a lot of guys hated you too because you were really good. Um, they're like, good kid, but I wish you wouldn't be at this contest. Um, but you know,
I think people ask sometimes like what was one of like your greatest moments throughout this journey? And I have to say one of the greatest moments easily, you're talking about Shawn, you're talking about Cody, you're talking about Dean, Rick Cicito, is when I finally got to meet all these guys later on, become friends with them, and like say still to this day, like, thank you so much, like, for what you did for me then. Like, because you were talking about how the what ifs with Elvis's career. If it wasn't for Cody, if it wasn't for Dean, if it wasn't for Shawn, if it wasn't for Bill Sherry, if it wasn't for you, for all these guys that you know paved that way before me, and for all these other guys that are my age and a little bit older and younger, I don't know where I would be. Because when I say I was so anti going to see this Elvis Tribute Artist show, I mean, I was almost repulsed that my grandmother did this because I was like, why are you making me have to sit through this show of this just some guy in a jumpsuit, tearing down my hero? And yet in reality, it was truly like this was God saying, here's your sign, like this is what you need to do. And that I knew it. I was just like, that's what I'm gonna do. And because I just had never seen anything like it. I never even knew this world existed. And so, like, truly, one of the greatest things is becoming friends with, all of you guys, and just being able to say, like, thank you so much for what you did for me then. And because, I mean, without Elvis, without you guys, I mean, I think about all these different amazing things that have happened in my life. You know, I mean, I think about, my fiance. That's one that comes really instantly to mind. Without Elvis, without being introduced to this Elvis tribute artist world, I mean, who knows if I would ever met her? There's so, who knows if I would have made the friends that I would have made. There's so many things that I think about that I'm just so grateful for for Elvis, and then again for all you guys that paved the way for us, younger guys like me.
yeah, yeah. But hey, and you're going to have to pay it forward. 'Cause there's going to be other
Absolutely.
ones. There's going to be other guys coming up, and yeah, that's cool. That's cool to hear. Something that's interesting though. You got into this business, young kid, you know, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, and everyone's like, man, in a couple years, he's going to go and do the ultimate. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. Um, did you feel that pressure?
You know, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's always that kind of pressure, but I have such an amazing, family and support system behind me that all they've ever asked, no matter what I was doing, is just do your best. Just uh, li- you know, listen to your gut, follow your heart, you know, do, you know, you know, who you are, you know what you stand for. If you can do that, there's really nothing more that we'll ever ask of you. And so, while I think there always is pressures, like how you said, I've always just done what I felt like was right for me when it comes to competing, when it comes to the ultimate, when it comes to preliminaries and all that. I think that the saying may be old, it may be in some people's eyes cliche, but it's not to me. God does work in mysterious ways, and his will be done. And so I think that's just truly what keeps me going.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good answer. And I think you've got to find a way to get grounded in entertainment, be it this or any other kind of entertainment, because there's harsh realities in it. Not every day is a win. Um, and you can stockpile a bunch of wins, and it's that one thing that you want that you can't accomplish or whatnot that you can really, get in your headspace. So it's good to hear that you got that support system for sure. I think most successful guys do have that, in some way, shape, or form. But you and well, I mean, everyone obviously went through this, but there's at your age going through this, and especially at the time of your life, the age that you were and how you were just getting into the ultimate stuff, and then boom, we have this big pandemic, everything shut down. Your generation in particular, I feel, your generation that was in their early 20s, kids that were still in school, or just getting out of school, college age kids, I think it really had an impact. And depending on who the individual is, I think in some places it could have been a positive impact too. I'm not saying that everything's negative, but it did have a massive impact. I mean, nobody had ever had to go through that before, really. Um, and I know certainly it did impact the entertainment industry in general, let alone, the Elvis tribute artist world. How did that have any kind of impact on you in terms of, where you were at, your dreams, your thoughts, your hopes, and then, being basically out of it for what, like maybe a year, and then coming back into it. How did that change things for you?
Wow. You know, I mean, as you said, so it's funny you even mentioned that. So I had won my first preliminary contest in October of 2019, secured my ticket for the 2020 Ultimate, and then obviously, the world shut down. The Ultimate was postponed to 2021. All of us guys that had gotten our ticket somewhere were waived for the next year, and they even actually, because uh those opportunities that normally were there for ETAs to be able to compete and get back to the ultimate were very scarce, if even there at all. They had invited back my first year of the ultimate, top five finalists from the past 10 years. So it was very unique to be a part of an ultimate contest during the pandemic like that, that did have my different adjustments to fit the criteria of the ongoing pandemic. you know, I think if the pandemic did anything, it showed me, it showed so many of us just how strong our Elvis community is, and just how much love there really is in our Elvis community with the fans, with other ETAs. I remember that myself and a group of other guys, we just decided, kind of collectively, hey, let's do something for the fans, and also just to get an opportunity to still perform and do these little Facebook Live concerts where one person would start, he'd do it on his page, he'd tell the fans to go to the next guy's page, the next guy's. And we had said, like, we'll put a PayPal link up there if anyone wants to send money, but that's not what we're doing it for. We're doing it for the fans during this time of uncertainty and all that. And I mean, when I say that I remember one pandemic, one of those Facebook lives that we did, when each of us, we did it, and we looked at the grand total, and each of us were able to walk away with $1,000 each in donations, or in you know tip money and all that. I mean, if we had never felt the love from the Elvis fans and from the Elvis community and the Elvis world before then, we felt it more than ever right then. I mean, we were all completely taken aback. And, you know, I remember my mom, she couldn't even work at the time.
Mm.
That money helped me be able to help my mom, take care of myself, take care of my siblings at the time, be able to stay afloat. That meant so much to me. And so if I can say anything from the pandemic, it's that it just showed me how much love there is within this Elvis world of ours. And, just how truly grateful I am every day to the fans and to everyone who makes up this community.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, it was an interesting time. And it's interesting how everyone dealt with it in their own way. We went into work one day and there was a meeting and before the show, and they were just like, "Hey, this is the last show until further notice." And I mean, we have signed contracts and everything else, and you just like, okay, well, um, and at that moment in time, it was supposed to be like a week or a couple weeks or whatever,
Right.
and we were the probably the fastest thing back anywhere. We were 100 days shut down, and
Wow.
then we were back doing socially distanced shows and all that stuff. But during that time, I just said to myself, I know I am going to go insane. I'm not the kind of person who just sits around and does nothing. And I did it. Really, the precursors of what is now the Ryan Files and also ETA Files, the two podcasts I have, it kind of started then. I was doing a thing just called Ryan's World, just trying to connect to people, and be be positive because there was a lot of negativity going around, obviously back then. Now, I went and got a job, just because I build a lot of stuff. I love just building with my hands, and I built this beautiful desk. You can't see it, but uh, just all kinds of stuff. I love building, and I went and got a job at Home Depot during that
No
time,
way.
just because I was like, everybody in there knows me. It's like I feel like I'm Norm from Cheers. I don't know if you even remember that, but
I
when
know. Cheers. Yeah.
when I walk into Home Depot, everyone's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And so it was kind of awesome fun. But what was really, really great about it for me was having spent at that point in time, 20 some plus years in the entertainment business. And then for the first time ever having a job like that. I never had, I mean, maybe back in high school, I had a job like that. But after that, I never had a job where I was working for someone. I've always had my own business, always worked for myself. Um, or a subcontractor like I am with Legends in Concert. So to be able to be in that experience and work and get to see how other people live, how other people's lives. I mean, like, I know how much money I made compared to what I'm used to making. And I got to thinking, you know what? These are the people that would come out to our shows. Think of how much money a ticket is, how hard they had to work for that money for a ticket to come to our show. You know what I mean? And if you've ever had a bad show in your life, like where you're like, man, I don't have it today. I don't really care. Having that realization will change your mind real quick and understand, man, dude, every show is so important. These people are working so hard, you know, given working hard, getting that money to come and see you perform. And if you don't have the ability to go out there and give it everything you got, then there's something wrong with you. So, I mean, I think like it was one of those times where you had a choice. You could either, and a lot of people did, man, you could get depressed, you could get beaten down, socially awkward, weird, and all that, or you could find some way to be positive. And I'm proud of the fact that I did that. And it kind of changed my perspective on so many things.
And I kind of want to jump off that. We were talking about MDQ earlier. We're talking about this for, a lot of people that haven't been to Branson or they haven't been to Pigeon Forge or, Myrtle Beach, those kind of places where there's, you know, residency shows. They're very, so show centric towns. Something that I truly relished on was just that gift of gratefulness and being blessed to be able to go out on stage 3 4 times a week, no matter what's going on, in your personal life, and all that, and be able to entertain some people. I remember there were so many days, you know, that first year being out there. It was the first time in my life I'd ever lived away, from my family and all that. It was the first time I moved out, and how that show and those people in that audience was what got me through that day. Seeing their faces was what got me through that day. And when after the show we would go out and obviously we do this as well with at Elvis festivals or Elvis tribute artist shows, and do a little quick meet and greet, and we'd basically de-greet the fans as they walk out, shake hands and all that. And it never, I never took for granted, and I never will, being able to 3 or 4 nights a week, every week, of the year, listen to people say, thank you so much for what you did. Like, you took me back. I've been having a really hard time. This was what I really needed. And it was just like, what a gift, to be able to to say that, and then like when the buses would come with, to the show, for those that don't know as well, a lot of times in Branson and Pigeon Forge, especially during the spring and the summer and the fall, there'll be buses that come and they'll be from different groups of people. And it was always so much fun to just go out there and after the show talk with them for a while. A lot of times I'd take my guitar afterwards and I'd be like, "Hey, would you like to hear another song?" and all that. So that's such a cool story that you said about, with Home Depot and all that because, you know, it, it, I think we can all say that one thing the pandemic did teach us even more so than we already knew was just being thankful for this amazing life that we have.
Yeah. Amen, man. Amen. And being thankful for the fact that you, my friend, are going back to the ultimate this year. Just a couple weeks ago, huh? You went down to Nashville and tore it up.
Man, I'm so stoked. I'm so thankful and blessed that, that through the times that I've gotten to go to the Ultimate, that I've gotten to represent the two states that I've called home, Tennessee and Missouri, to be able to represent Nashville for my second time now at the Ultimate and to be able to represent Branson this past year at the Ultimate. I'm someone who, home is definitely where the heart is for me. I always love, being home with my family, with my friends. And so I'm super, super stoked to be able to represent Nashville again, to represent, my Nashville Elvis Festival family, just as I was this past year, to be able to represent you and everyone at Legends this past year in the Ultimate with being the reigning Branson Elvis Festival champion. So I'm super excited. Just I'm already the wheels are already spinning on the game plan for Memphis because as you know very well, August will be here before we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be here. So funny. And you know this, you've probably been down this road before. Oh, maybe you haven't had to, but a lot of what happens this time of year is guys will go to Nashville. And we've been working on just trying to find that sweet spot of our date because obviously Branson, uh, if you have weather, snow, ice, whatever, it's a problem because of all the hills, you know.
Right.
So we had it earlier and we're like, man, it's just too much of a risk with weather. Um, there's other festivals you gotta, you don't want it to be in competition with, not just contests, but other guys having festivals. And unfortunately, sometimes they get it on the same days and stuff like that, But anyways, trying to find that sweet spot. I think we found it this year at the beginning of May, but it is so funny because I didn't know who won Nashville. All right. I didn't know who won, but like the day after, I started getting all these emails from guys like, "Hey, I can I come to be in Branson?" You know, uh, and I just figured, well, these guys must not have qualified. So, and then I found out it was you. And I gave you a call. I told you, it's like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
So, very good, man. Well, listen, sometimes these things take a little bit of time, and I can't help but think that, like we talked about earlier, your experience with MDQ is only going to help you uh, in your effort to get back to the ultimate and do what you set out to do in the first place. So,
Absolutely. And like I said, to be able to represent, you know, both states that I've called home, it's such an honor, man. Like one of the highlights of the 2 years doing MDQ was being able to represent Branson, the Branson Elvis Festival, because, you know, to know that you have made such a imprint in such a lively community, not just in when it comes to Elvis. I'm talking about entertainment. Branson is still one of the longest running, entertainment city hubs in America, in the world. And so that's such a thrill. And then of course, I mean, to represent, you know, my state's capital, Music City, where there's just so much rich history and country music. And when I'm talking about Elvis, Elvis Presley recorded over 500 songs at RCA Studio B in Nashville. To be able to represent such, entertainment centric places is such an honor. So I'm super, super stoked. It's always just a thrill to be on the Graceland soundstage, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the results. It's such a thrill, an honor, and a privilege. And, we can't wait, man. It's gonna be so, to be there this year. I mean, 48 years, man, and we're still coming back. We're still honoring this guy who brought all of us together. I mean, it's the best.
Yeah, man, that's cool. Speaking of Studio A and Studio B there in Nashville, during the Identical, I got to be there's a lot of cool places I got to perform at, including the Grand Ole Opry. But there's a scene early on where I'm playing a young Drexel Hemsley, and I'm playing the piano and I'm standing
Yep.
up and I'm dancing. That was RCA Studio A.
Oh, nice.
And then whenever I'm recording, Ryan Wade later on is recording City Lights in the studio. That's RCA Studio B. That's where Elvis
No
recorded.
way, man. That's so cool, dude.
Yeah.
Wasn't the song that you did as Drexel Hemsley, wasn't it called like Bebop and Baby?
Yeah, I think yeah, that particular song was Bebop and Baby. Yeah. There's a bunch of them,
M-
man. It's kind of
Man,
funny.
I remember the first time I watched that video, I had that song stuck in my head the whole time. Bebop and Baby, shake it, rock it and roll.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny too, because like they would send me I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works, but this is how it worked. They would send me audio, um, an MP3 of someone just like a scratch track vocal on on these songs, and like they would send it to me at night, like 7 or 8 p.m. and it might be 10 songs, and the next day I'd have to get in the studio and be there to record them. And like they wouldn't send me the lyrics or anything. I had to go and like write out the lyrics. And I mean, it was just a crazy, crazy time. But um, I remember singing, uh, Bebop baby, she can go, go, go. Bebop baby, shake it. Rockin' and roll. Rockin' and roll is what I thought.
Mhm.
But the actual lyrics I was told is rocket and roll in the studio.
Oh,
So
nice.
I don't know if I did it right or not, but anyways, yeah. So, um, what's the best part of being an ETA?
Oh, it has to be easily Elvis and the fans, I mean, I growing up, shared a lot of things in common with Elvis. I'm naturally a very, introverted, shy person, as crazy as that may be to believe. I was a loner in school. I was picked on a lot in school. Being an Elvis fan, wanting to dress, do your hair and dress like Elvis to school, it's not really a cool thing when I was younger. I mean, I used to get a lot of flack by other guys. I definitely felt that, sense of loneliness that he felt so much of his life. So when I found Elvis, I found almost like a friend that while I never got to meet him in person, it's as if I knew him my whole life. It's as if like he was a part of me, And then when it comes to the fans, again, going back to that loneliness, there were so many times where I felt like I didn't know where I belonged when you're taken in by the Elvis fans, you become a part of the family. And it was truly when my journey, I think, truly began when I was 14. It was truly that I found where I belonged in life. It was with them celebrating our guy. And it always will be. So that's easily the best part.
Well, and for every yin, there's a yang. What's the worst part of being an ETA?
Oh gosh, I don't know if there's a worst part. I I couldn't
Oh, come
say.
on. I know you're being polite and politically correct here, and you don't want to
Okay, okay,
say
okay.
anything bad, but there's obviously some things that sometimes just are like, oh man, I can do without that.
Okay, probably one that I could think of right now is when you have to break people's hearts by telling them that you actually don't like peanut butter banana sandwiches because you don't like bananas.
How about just the that's the, yeah, I mean, and that's a small segment of it, but like, just because I perform as Elvis doesn't mean that everything about me is exactly like Elvis. And I don't go
Right.
through my life making sure that I've learned to like bananas because I have to like peanut butter banana sandwiches. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
things like that. I'm I would say probably I think I would get along with Elvis. I think that Elvis and I also would be very different human beings, you know.
Hmm.
Um
But I've always felt that truly, you know, obviously, we're there to bring back memories to the fans from then and now, and then we're also there to show Elvis, to show to new fans what Elvis truly is all about. But the reality of it is that just like we all become family, the fans also become fans of us. And so I've always found that, you know, they know what you can do on stage. They want to know more about you too as a person. And so I've always felt that, you know, being true to who I am and being who Riley is something that they want to see just as much as all the moves and the hair and the voice and all that stuff. They want to know more about you too. So I 100% agree. I think that sometimes uh what people that don't get this world, they're not a part of it at the moment, because I always say that Elvis has a way of bringing people in whether they like it or not. um what they might think, oh, I bet you have to do this and that. Well, no, because the fans, they love us just as much for who we are as what we do on that stage.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very very cool. Um I asked this of all the guys, and I mean, you can visually create whatever version of this you want. Um, but if you had a way to maybe go back in time, or uh, you know, bring him here or whatnot, if you had an hour to just hang out with Elvis, you know, what would you talk about?
Well, for one thing, I'd love to talk about the early days, because I feel like it would just be so cool to hear Elvis, because there's obviously those infamous performances of Elvis in Vegas where he kind of, you know, picks fun at himself about his early career and all that. But then there's been a few interviews, like, he did a couple interviews for Elvis on tour in '72, and it was amazing to hear how much he like could vividly rewalk those paths that he, forged in the '50s. I'd love to talk with him, like, in like 1973 or '74. What was it like 20 years ago, man, when you first came up, and to hear that, and then also, you know, to talk about like stuff like in the mid '60s when he's making the movies and the world's changing, and like what was going through your mind? How did you make that pivot that I think is the greatest pivot of all time, the greatest comeback of all time, the '68 comeback, to talk about those many moments in lives where there's that saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown. That here's Elvis, and he's on top, but it's not coming without its difficulties. And how did what kept you going in those moments? What was your your why in those moments to keep going?
Yeah, that's a what is your why? That's a great way of putting it. I often thought about, I would love to go back and, not like, I'm not trying to be like the ghost of Christmas past or anything like that, or future or whatever. I'd love to just be like this, you know, guy, like a man in black almost, Uh uh Elvis is 21 years old. And at the end of 1956, he's 21 years old, and he's already made $1 million. And maybe, right after he gets off the Ed Sullivan show or whatever, just be there and say, Elvis, sit down. I want to talk to you. You're 21 years old. You're young. And you don't know this, but if you live your life the way that my history tells me that you're going to live it, you only have 21 years left. you are right now in the middle
Mm.
of your life, which is pretty young. You know,
Yeah.
you've already made it. And there's going to be some bumps along the way, but you're going to be great. But how you live your life is going to determine how much life you can live. People love you. People love you more years after, for more years longer than you actually lived. That's where we're at, you know. Now, Elvis has been going longer than he was alive, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want to kind of just tell him, like, dude, you know, people love you. Take care of yourself, you know, take care of yourself, you know.
That's a great thing to ask. I mean, I, you know, I could only imagine what would be going through Elvis's head at 21 if or like to like Elvis when he was, the next year, 1957, if you went up to him on the set of Jailhouse Rock and just said like, "Hey man, do you know like in 20 years like your time's up?" I mean, how would someone react to that, especially someone so young as him? I mean, when he, when he was, I mean, I'm 22. I don't even know how I would process that. So that's such a cool, you know, a cool kind of hypothetical thing to go back in time and, you know, basically be like, man, like, you're you're gonna be great. This is, you're already there. It's only up from here. But there's gonna be within your personal life some bumps in the road. And if you want to keep going, this is, you're gonna want to watch out for these things.
Yeah. Yep. It's just interesting, you know, and uh, probably all of us wish we had something like that, you know, that could come from the future and tell us, guide us a little bit better. And anyway, yeah, it's just an interesting point. Interesting point. You know, I'm like 10 years older than he was now when he passed away, you know, and I'm like, I don't feel that old. To be gone at 42 is just it's robbery, you know, it's just such a shame. But
Think
yeah,
about all the things he could have done,
yeah,
if he would have lived. I mean, I would have loved to have seen him get back into acting like how he wanted, but this time do it like how he wanted to do serious dramatic roles, and then how my biggest thing is what would Elvis in the 80s looks like in music or in the 90s or even today? What would he be doing? What if like Elvis at 90 years old was still alive? Like where would his life be? So, those are all great, what if hypothetical scenarios to think about to see where would Elvis's life taken him if he had lived past August 16th, 1977.
yeah, yeah, for sure, man. You know, just imagine like Elvis Presley, you know, stayed in shape. The you know the stuff, you know, the prescription stuff and all that stuff. He didn't have that. He was healthy. You know, remember how awesome he looked like, and that's the way it is, just
Oh
thin
man.
and trim and just looked awesome. Or in the leather, you know, and he stays at it, man. He looks exactly the same way. And in 1977, he comes out and he's Han Solo in Star Wars, you know,
Right.
or something. You know, it'd be like, whoa, that'd be awesome, right?
I could I I would love to have seen him play like Han Solo or Indiana Jones,
Yeah, yeah, you know, just like yeah,
No,
these,
no, no, no disrespect to Harrison Ford. I love
yeah,
Harrison Ford, but that would have been so cool. Or to see him play, again, no disrespect to Sean Connery. I love Sean Connery. What if Elvis would have been James Bond? Like how
yeah,
different would the role have been, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, Elvis is James Bond. Are you kidding me? That would be amazing.
Oh, I
I
would
don't know
I
if
mean,
I don't know if Elvis is doing the accent or not. But you know, I'm sure Ian Fleming wouldn't love having an American be 007. But hey, it just
if
it's
anyone
incredible thoughts, you know, to think.
if
I love
anyone
it.
could have done it, it would have been Elvis.
Yeah, man. And you know, just thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, I'll tell you what, man, this has been a lot of fun.
Oh,
I'm
it's been
really,
great, man.
really excited about what's going to happen for you this year, and I hope you go to the ultimate and kill it. Tell people
Thank
how
you,
they can
man.
get a hold of you, follow you, watch you, connect with you, all that.
Yeah, so you can get a hold of me through my Facebook page, which is Riley Jenkins Entertainer, or my Instagram page, which is Riley A Jenkins. And keep up with me through there. We're always constantly posting my schedule, where I'm going to be at, where to find me. We're always posting videos from events and all that, keeping everybody in the loop. When we're at an Elvis festival, such as Nashville this past weekend. So go check me out on those two pages. And yeah, and so hopefully we'll see you guys down the road somewhere.
Awesome, man. Dude, I appreciate you. Stay in
Thank you,
touch
Ryan.
and good luck. If you need anything, you know how to get a hold of me. All right, buddy?
I will. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Riley Jenkins. Thank you, bro.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the ETA Files. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the ETA Files community. And if you're looking for something a little different, be sure to stop by my podcast, The Ryan Files. Keep rocking, my friends, and I'll see you next week with another story from the Elvis Tribute artist world. In the meantime, check out these video links below.